Welcome to the Magento Pulse on Talk Commerce. I'm your host, Brent Peterson. In this special series of episodes, we bring you stories of the people from the Magento community, as well as the fantastic Magento events like Meet Magento New York, happening October 10th, 2024. For more information, go to meetmagentonyc.com. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Content in Commerce from contentbasis.io. Discover how your content can build free traffic for your e-commerce store by visiting contentbasis.io. Stay tuned as we dive into the latest in the world of Magento. For more information about Meet Magentos, click on the QR code in the video or go to tlk.fm/mm24nyc. Thank you. Welcome to this special HuFA episode of Talk Commerce. Today I have Sanne Bolkenstein. She is with HuFA. Sanne, go ahead. Give us an introduction. Tell us your day-to-day role and one of your passions in life.
Thank you. I'm the commercial director at HuFA, so I'm mainly responsible for partnerships and overall commercial strategy. And apart from that, I'm also doing a bit of HR activities since our team is expanding. We need some increasing amount of work there. So those are my main day-to-day activities. Apart from that, I'm also a board member for MageOS in the Netherlands, so the industry organization for Magento here in the Netherlands, organizing Meet Magento Netherlands this year. And one of my passions, I would say, the biggest one is wine. I love wine, particularly French wine. I've got quite a collection at home. And so, that's what I like to occupy myself with if I'm not working.
Wow, we are going to get along great.
I thought so. Yeah, it's a good conversation starter.
Yes, perfect. Sanne, one thing I forgot to tell you or ask you about is I do this thing called the Free Joke Project. I'm just going to tell you a joke. All you have to do is say, all you have to do is rate the joke 1 through 5.
Okay. 1 being the lowest and 5 the highest?
Yeah, so some people actually give it a 4 out of 10, but you can do whatever you want.
Sounds good.
So here we go. And this is a good one. And you'll like this one. Here we go. I asked my German friend if he knew the square root of 81. He said no. It's a thinking joke.
Oh, right. I'm processing the joke. The square root of 81.
It's 9.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
It's in English, sort of. Yeah. It probably wasn't a fair joke to say anyways.
I would definitely rate that high as I like language jokes in general. So I would say 4.5.
Oh, perfect. All right. Good. First 4.5. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's tell us, for our new listeners, tell us a little background on HuFA and how important it is in the Magento community.
Sure. So HuFA has been around for 3 years now, so we're still relatively new. And we started as a front-end theme for Magento 2. So our founder, Willem Wichman, is a Magento developer himself. And just like many other Magento developers, when Magento 2 came around, he became increasingly frustrated with the standard front-end that comes with it, called Luma. Basically because it has a lot of outdated JavaScript in it, making it not ideal for performance and also difficult to work with. So the development times for Magento 2 became increasingly longer, especially compared to Magento 1, which makes it difficult to explain to customers why they have to pay more for essentially the same. And so out of these frustrations, he started looking for alternative. And nowadays, there's lots of alternatives like PWA or headless solutions, but those require actually a completely different skill set because most of them are React-based and Magento developers, know Magento and PHP, so that's quite different. So he basically came to the conclusion that what he wants was just a native Magento 2 front-end that works. And since that wasn't around, he started building it himself during COVID, when we were all locked up in our house anyway. And that's how HuFA came about. So the HuFA Themes is the first product that we launched, and it's still our main product, the most successful one, replacing the existing Luma frontend with a new one called HuFA. It's extremely lightweight. It only has 2 dependencies as compared to Luma, which has over 200, making it very performant and easy to work with for developers. So development time is much less, performance is much higher, total cost of ownership is less. So overall, people are very happy. Developers love working with it. So that's also our tagline is e-commerce made happy. We want everyone in the ecosystem to be happy. So that's our goal. And since then, we've launched a couple of additional products, amongst others our checkout for, basically the same thing. The next big kind of thing for conversion for merchants was checkout. So we wanted to optimize that. So we did a complete rebuild of the Luma checkout, but then the HuFA way, so based on MageWire, which is a technology developed by one of our own colleagues, Willem Portman, making the checkout much easier to work with. So you can build different kind of checkout experience for different kind of users and also much more performant, thereby increasing conversion rates for merchants. And then the last product that we've developed last year was HuFA Enterprise, which ensures full compatibility with Adobe Commerce, B2B, and Sensei to cover like the whole suite of Magento users, Magento and Adobe Commerce users that there is. And then we've also enriched the HuFA theme with a UI library with predefined components that work out of the box with HuFA to make HuFA development even more easy and fun.
Wow, that's all you're doing? I want to. I don't want to get too technical, but I think it's important that users understand. Or I'll back up a minute. It's my thought that 90% of the Magento sites out there, and getting less because the ones that have HuFA are fast, but 90% of the Magento sites out there are most likely very slow. And I had a conversation with Yisa Reitsma last week about that. Even if you do implement React or you do a PWA front end, or you decide that you want to redo Luma to be performant, it is going to cost you more in developer time than simply getting the HuFA license and installing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you react to people who are how do you react to people who are saying, well, maybe we should just go with PWA Studio, or I do want to just stick with Luma?
So those are 2 different things. PWA Studio is actually put in like maintenance mode by Adobe, so they're not actively like getting new clients for that. They're not further developing that product. So I would, for that reason alone, advise against going for PWA Studio. There are, of course, other PWA solutions out there, but I would say they look very specifically for the use case. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? If performance is your main issue, going with a React-based front end is not going to, necessarily solve that issue. So if that's the only thing that you're looking for, indeed, as you said, HuFA is a much more cost-efficient and quick way to solve that. If you are looking for other capabilities, like, having an app like experience that's also available offline or something like that, then yes, it would make sense to look at PWA. But like I said, it's a very specific use case that's not necessarily one-on-one, something you can copy on the existing Magento market. If you decide to stay with Luma, I really wouldn't know why you would do that. I know that when we first came to market, there was a concern, for instance, around extension compatibility. Like, not all the extensions that are out there were compatible with HuFA. But at this point, we've matured into a product that is, kind of becoming the default standard in Magento development. And so, yeah, it's not a silver bullet. Like you say, it's not going to solve all your problems instantly and you never have any issues. But it is the best starting point for having a performance shop and for passing core web vitals if you work with Magento. So in my opinion, I wouldn't know why you would choose anything other than HuFA if you choose Magento.
Yeah, and I realize it was a little bit of a leading question. I apologize for that. And
That's
of course,
okay.
after watching couple seasons of Ted Lasso, I also know that Dutch people are very direct and just get to the point. So I should have just
Yeah.
gotten to the point. The one big thing that I'm always frustrated with is Adobe's stance towards how they're putting Magento out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that there isn't a solution anymore out of the box for a front end.
Yes.
That's performant. And the current
Yes.
theme is literally 14 years old.
Yeah, that's frustration that is shared in this community. I think it's important to realize that Adobe is not an e-commerce company. It's an enterprise corporate software solution specialist that is much more focusing on like digital experiences than e-commerce per se. At some point, they wanted to enrich their portfolio for understandable reasons with an e-commerce leg, and so they acquired Magento. But if you look at like the overall product suite that they have, and the overall revenue that they generate, it's only a minor part of what they do. So it doesn't have the same focus for them as it does for people like you and I who work with Magento on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a very important principle to keep in mind when you think about like why is there not a sufficient front-end strategy? Like why are they like lagging behind in this aspect? And then the other end, I think the great thing about open source is that when the solution is not fitting or when something is lacking, other people are free to build one themselves. And that's exactly what we did with HuFA. So we saw that there was an opportunity, or Willem saw that there was an opportunity there because there's a need for a functioning native Magento 2 front end, and there wasn't one available in the market. So he decided to build it himself. And I think that's the wonderful thing about open source, is the innovation that it brings with it. And the continuous drive from a community to make something better that works for everyone.
Yeah, I do. I want to switch gears a little bit and just briefly kind of dive into MageOS.
Sure.
When the fork happened, I was against it.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, I have completely turned my view around, and I'm completely for it now, especially after hearing what Adobe says at every single Meet Magento conference, and then what they do after each Magento conference. And again, I'll be very direct. They do nothing. They say a lot.
Yeah.
They show up, and they're very conciliatory towards our community. They're very open to saying they're willing to change. They're wanting to do something. But then when they go home to their office, they do nothing. Mm-hmm. So I believe that MageOS is sort of the answer and solution for Magento going forward in the long term. And my the biggest thing that I see that needs to happen is innovation within the core product. Mm-hmm. And if you look at other platforms, what they're doing within their core, there's this thing called artificial intelligence or machine learning, and other platforms are embracing this, and at least one has it in its core already, and Magento is doing absolutely nothing. And Adobe Sensei, as you mentioned earlier, has never really taken hold in the Adobe Commerce space, and it's not available at all to Magento users. Sure. So tell us a little bit about the background to MageOS and how that would benefit somebody who's wanting to just simply do a Magento store without necessarily using or without even looking at Adobe Commerce.
Yeah, I think the beauty of MageOS is indeed, as you said, it's kind of the community taking matters into their own hands. So instead of continuing to rely on this company that is backing the software, community kind of rallied around the product and said, okay, if we don't get corporate backing, we're just going to do it ourselves. And all the things that you mentioned, like, yeah, of course, there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot of that should be incorporated into the core of a product if you want it to stay relevant for the future. And that's exactly the kind of guarantee that MageOS gives Magento users, because it is a true open source project. There is no company behind it. There's not one company behind it. Obviously, the community consists of companies, but it's really to make sure that Magento stays a relevant player, not only now, but also in the future, because there are so many great aspects to this product. There's so many great aspects of open source that is important to have in the e-commerce landscape. If we don't safeguard that, we will turn into a SaaS solution landscape. And to me, that would be a huge loss for everyone in the community, but especially the merchants. I think diversification of options, of platforms, is ultimately good because there's such a wide variety of users, there's such a wide variety of use cases. So it's good to have options, it's good to have choice, and that's what MageOS is offering to merchants. So it's a Magento solution that ensures relevance not only now but also in the future.
When do you think we will see that first iteration? Right now it's just a mirror of the Magento code base. When do you think we'll see that first iteration with some changes that are substantive for features within the code base?
I can't say when. I can see that there are some developments within Adobe where they're moving even more upmarket, so more into the Salesforce demandware space, I would say, and that any a merchant that is not in that same category, like revenue-wise, is just simply irrelevant. But that there's features that they currently offer either within Magento or within Adobe Commerce that are relevant for that group. So say anything, who's a merchant that does less than 100 million in revenue per year would still need some of those features, but it is not interesting to Adobe anymore. And I think that's when there's a need for MageOS or, well, someone at least to take that and to incorporate those features into MageOS or Magento, and thereby, part ways from the Magento as it is now. And I do think that's going to happen relatively soon, but I can't say exactly when.
I want to talk a little bit about the Magento community. I don't have a stake in Magento anymore. I don't have an agency. I don't have any Magento customers. But yet I find that I'm the only one from this side of the world, from the US side, talking about Magento on an ongoing basis. And it seems like there's a different thought about the community in Europe than it is compared to the US. And I realize you're in Europe, so you have a different perspective on it, right? So I just want to vocalize that point that there is a difference between the way Americans see Magento and the community itself. And I know Mark Schuss said it really well in one of my writings. He said it's the same 100 people that are showing up to every conference, and we're not necessarily growing. Where in Europe, it's a continually evolving process. I mean, can you first just comment on that? But then, do you have any advice for us Americans to try to get people more involved in it?
I think that, that's true. The Magento community is definitely growing in Europe. One of the things that I'm really proud of what we do here in the Netherlands is that Meet Magento is organized by, it's really a community effort. So there's, in the organization team, there's 6 or 7 different agencies who work together. So they are essentially competitors, but we work together because we understand if we grow the pie, the pieces of the pie for each and every one of us is also going to grow. So it makes more sense to work together than to compete, basically. And I think that's overall the sense that I get. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of trust in the community. There's a lot of trust in the skills that people have. There's a lot of innovation taking place. Of course, we are an example of that. But there's also other companies popping up, like for instance, Run Vision here in the Netherlands, who focus only on performance monitoring or making waves in the Magento community. So that's also a reason why people trust the product and trust the process, so to say. And then, there's that, I think, kind of intangible feeling that you just want to, it has a social aspect as well, and which makes it fun, and I think that's very important to cherish, even though Marcus could be right. It's always the same 100 people showing up. Yet there is also something to say for the dedication that these people show, that they do show up every time. And it makes it clear that there's a need for that. And I think that social interaction is very important. But it is at the same time also important to advocate it externally as well. So that's why I'm personally always trying to get more women, for instance, involved in the community by actively inviting them, like creating that open space, making sure that, everybody feels the positivity that we bring with us to a conference or to an event or gathering, because it's contagious. It's what it makes people want to be part of that. And also they advertise or network in their own network, so it spreads that way. So my advice would be to come to these conferences in Europe, see how it differs maybe from the US, and then just start small by organizing your own gatherings, meetups in the US.
Yeah, that's good. There are 2 that happen every year still, and that's fantastic. So Meet Magento New York is, I think, scheduled this year in October.
Yeah.
And Meet Magento Florida will be hopefully next year in February, which is also, I think Meet Magento Florida is such a great event, and it's so much fun, and it has that Imagine sort of feel.
Definitely. I love both events.
Yeah. And there's been an effort to sort of revive some kind of pre or post Imagine conference around the Adobe Summit, which hasn't seemed to have a lot of traction. I went to last year to the event before the Adobe Summit, but I feel like there has to be something that is Magento specific, and maybe an Las Vegas event that's outside of, the one-day event that's next to Adobe Summit could be something exciting. I like what you said about, though, that the community feel and that aspect of meeting somebody and having community with other people. And I think that's the part that I miss the most about going to a lot of Magento events and having that community. And maybe the advice is to invite people to, maybe the other problem in the US is the fact that it is so big. It's hard to, it's not as easy to get to one place to the next. It's not a train ride from one city to the next. It's a flight and hotel. And now New York hotels are so expensive. So it makes that journey a little bit more expensive. And I think there's a big commercial aspect in the US too, to everything, especially from partners. I hear partners always saying, and we used to put on a lot of Magento events in my past. Your dog is much bigger than our dog, by the way.
Sorry.
No, don't worry about it. That's fantastic. That the commercial aspect is important for the American partner, because I think they have to get ROI out of every single one of these events.
Yeah.
And I think that the way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the way the Europeans go about it, or at least the Dutch especially, is that they're bringing together a whole bunch of people that have a lot of solutions that everybody can draw on, and that they share at these events, and that those solutions are usable and attainable just in the open source perspective.
Definitely. It is, though, of course, there's a commercial aspect to it. It's great, but it's nice to meet people, and have a good time and have some, drinks and food and laughter. But if there wasn't a commercial aspect to it, I mean, none of us are in this business, for charitable reasons. And for Meet Magento Netherlands, when we started organizing it last year, we were also very much aware, okay, we have zero buffer, so it needs to be completely profitable, or at least, we need to make sure that it doesn't cost us any money, because we don't have any, which was also a little bit stressful, I should say. So there is a commercial aspect, but I think it's here we view the commercial aspect as more than just like the direct translation into sales after an event like that, which is very difficult to measure. And also the effects of these events, in my opinion, are always like way more long-term than short-term.
You're
Sorry
great.
about that.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so it's not just sales, but it's also team building, right? Like bringing your teammates to an event where they gather new ideas, where they get inspired, where they make connections, where they find like how much they enjoy working in this space. That in the long term is beneficial for you as a company as well. It's also the context and networking. Like at some point, you don't know when, but at some point it might be relevant that that somebody you've spoken with at a conference like a year ago or 2 years ago needs your help, or like you could like do something together, something like that. So it's also that is also taken into account when considering the ROI of an event. And on the other hand, I love US conferences, I do, but if I see like how much it costs and if I try to imagine like how much it must cost to organize an event like that, it's a whole different ballgame than here in Europe. And so that's why my advice is like, start small.
Yeah.
Start small. It doesn't. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the idea of a smaller event is something I've been really wanting to do more, and now I think we have an opportunity, especially between MageOS and Magento Association, to have these sort of Meet Magento mini events. And the old idea of a Meet Magento event used to be, you have to get 400 or 500 people, and if you don't get that many people, it's not successful. I feel like the new model should be, let's get 50 people that are in a room that are talking about it, and let's start from a seed and grow it.
Exactly. That's also what we said with Meet Magento Netherlands when we brought it back after 5 years. It's like, you have to start somewhere. And what you do is the facilitation of bringing people together. So you need a venue, you need some drinks, you need some food, a stage where people can give presentations, and that's it. It doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to be like super corporate, because nobody in this industry is, and nobody really cares about that either. It's about bringing people together. And if you do that and you make it a success, and that's also what I said, like that's why we aimed for 150 attendees last year. I said that's going to be very easy to achieve. But if we aim for that and we make 300, it's a huge success. If you aim for 500 and you have 300, it's a failure. So it's also a matter of perception, right? And then you can indeed grow into something bigger, and you will find that people will be happy to contribute to that as well, because they've already seen the value. They've been there. They see like, yes, this is bringing me a lot. And it doesn't have to cost the world.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, so we have a few minutes left. Tell us anything fun and exciting happening with your HuFA, with the HuFA project. Is there any new products coming out that we should be looking for?
I think the main thing that you should be looking out for now is how we continue to build on the community. So we've recently taken on Rebecca Brockton on board, who's also a familiar name in the Magento space. And she is pushing out content like crazy, which I'm very happy about. And her latest project is the HuFA Hotcakes, which comes out every week on LinkedIn. It's a newsletter. It tells you all things HuFA, but also in more about what's happening in the Magento community. And I'm a big fan of this initiative because it really is bringing like the community together again. It's growing the attention for Magento, and it's also just a very fun read.
Yeah, I agree. My only criticism is it shows a cupcake, and that's different from a hot cake. So there's a little bit of brand confusion in my head when I see it. Mm-hmm. I really want to have a nice, delicious cupcake when a hot cake is more like a pancake in the US.
Oh, it might be because she's British that there's something going lost in translation there.
Yeah, I feel as though there should be stroopwafels in there.
Yes. Well, that's a very particular thing that we don't like to share too much.
Right, yes. Sanne, before we close out, I give everybody a chance to do a shameless plug about anything they'd like. What would you like to plug today?
I would like to plug actually diversity within e-commerce. It's another thing I'm very passionate about, and something that I mentioned. Like, I'm actively trying to get more women involved. But I think in overall, it would really benefit our whole industry if we have more diversity. So whether it comes to race, gender, sexual orientation, doesn't matter. I really think that if everybody tries to open their minds and welcome new people in the end, we will all benefit.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I know that the first part of that is just being aware, and myself being a white male. I realize that it is a lot of just other white males that are doing even this podcast, that you need diversity, and that diversity is so important, and it brings so much more. I don't know another word for diversity. It brings a different aspect to the entire picture of how not only the community, but how the product works, because products are also not just for one group of people; they're for all sorts of people. So I love that.
Yeah,
thank you so much for that.
If you look at like the typical industries or verticals that Magento is strong in, it's things like fashion, home decor, care products, and a lot of those like end customers, consumers are women. So building products for women by women helps. Probably also for a better product market fit. So
thank you. That's perfect. Sanne Bolkenstein, thank you so much for being here today. It's been such a great conversation.
Likewise. Thank you very much for having me.
Talk Commerce is a production of Content Basis, LLC. For more creative content, go to contentbasis.io.